We begin our two-part series on Rear Window by studying how brilliantly Alfred Hitchcock handles exposition. The beginning of a movie or a presentation causes directors and presenters high anxiety. When you begin, you have very little time to capture the interest of the audience and persuade them that they are in good hands. What makes exposition even more tricky is that at the same time you have to set the stage, explaining who is who and what is what. Without great cleverness, this can be a dull recitation of facts and circumstances. A movie makes a bad start if the exposition is done with dialogue or narration or titles. A presenter who begins with talk, talk, talk and bulleted lists can quickly lose an audience. It's well worth watching Hitchcock to see how to handle this tricky part of every presentation. Hitchcock, of course, has the jump on most of us at the beginning of his movies. He is a famous and popular commodity. He is the master of suspense. Audiences eagerly buy tickets to enjoy an edge-of-your-seat evening of entertainment. They come with high expectations. And what about when you present? You might be speaking to an audience who knows you, supports you, or is employed by your organization and is already on board. Maybe they've come out of genuine interest or curiosity, but they might be there because work requires it. Regardless, you've got a tougher job than Hitchcock, and pressure is on you to create a great opening and grab hold of your audience. Of course, presenters, just like Hitchcock, are dealing with and relying on audience assumptions. Some they will make before you utter a word. An audience is in a wait-and-see mode as you begin. They begin by asking these 3 questions before you start. Hitchcock's audience is likely prepared for a suspenseful first-rate evening of entertainment. Of course, they've paid for the privilege, so Hitchcock better deliver. But for Hitchcock's audiences in general, the answer to the second 2 questions, will I be interested and am I in capable hands, is yes and yes. Of course, since every Hitchcock movie is different, he has to quickly set the ground rules for Rear Window, while you as a presenter must quickly answer all 3 of these questions with ingenuity, skill, and a mastery of the topic. We can break that first question, what is your topic, down into 3 parts that guide your audience. You have to connect with your audience as quickly as possible. At the same time, you have this housework to do. This has the potential to be boring. You must bring your audience up to speed. For example, you must explore closely held assumptions on the topic, potential biases, key players, and where you and your ideas fit into the info chain. Hitchcock has to answer these questions too, but he uses images and sound to do that. As a presenter, you know this stuff doesn't usually jump off the screen and scream, "Tell me more," but you have to do it. Hitchcock begins Rear Window by setting the stage for his movie and introducing his main character. Hitchcock gives us a glimpse into Jeff Jeffries' private world with a panning shot of his apartment to show us exactly who is J.B. Jeffries. Here is how many presenters might begin with the ubiquitous bulleted list. Without a word spoken, Hitchcock reveals that Jeff is Jimmy Stewart. Hitchcock gets a ton of mileage from Stewart's movie persona. He's a handsome movie star who always plays an amiable guy with a reliable and trustworthy point of view. We see he's suffering in the heat. We see the incredible photo of the flying car that quite likely explains his broken leg and smashed camera. From the snarky note on his cast, we know that he has a sense of humor about himself and his predicament. In less than a minute, we learn a lot about Jeff. We know he is very helpless, strange in a Hitchcock thriller. We can guess that he's probably bored. He's taken a big step down from the adventures displayed on his walls. And since we realize that he's trapped in his apartment, his entertainment seems likely to come from the neighbors' apartments that he can see from his windows. These things could be enumerated in a bulleted list, but how much more interesting to see this without a word spoken. But here is what makes Hitchcock the master and a valuable teacher. Because he shows rather than tells, there are many questions left unanswered which draw his audience in immediately. For example, from the images of the demolished camera and the photograph of the flying car, the audience can wonder, is Jeff a reckless, restless adrenaline junkie? Or is he a very dedicated action photographer willing to do anything to get the shot? Or did Jeff, the action photographer, also take the Paris fashion magazine cover photo? Isn't this a strange undertaking for an action photographer? And what's with the negative image of the woman? Does it reflect on Jeff's feelings toward women? Are they negative or ambivalent? And finally, how frustrated and bored he must be stuck in his wheelchair. He's looking for excitement, and what might he do to find it? What kind of movie will this be with an impotent hero? Rather than answering questions, Hitchcock has used this exposition to give his audience something to think about. They are already participating in the movie. Could this same engagement be made by the bulleted list? Here is his view. These empty windows will be populated by people whom Jeff will find amusing, depressing, and capable of murder. Again, Hitchcock has done a brilliant thing. We are already eager to know who lives in these empty windows. We've already bought into the voyeur mentality that drives this movie. Jeff makes a living by watching brave people do dangerous things through the lens of his camera. It makes sense that Jeff will continue to watch what goes on around him. And from the way Hitchcock begins, we understand that these neighbors are important. The movie is called Rear Window, after all. So, how can you put Hitchcock's genius to work in your presentation? How can you begin strongly with engagement, with intrigue? Images are your best friend. One intriguing image will pull your audience in faster than any bulleted list. For example, if you are presenting on the subject of building trust, you might use this photo of a handwritten sign in front of an unattended fruit stand. It speaks about trust from its welcoming statement inviting shoppers to help yourself, followed by simple instructions on how to pay. There are no threats, no ultimatums. The honesty of the shopper is assumed. You might start with this image if you're talking about the dangers and lack of options facing homeless youth. Again, as many questions are asked as are answered in this photo. Or what about using this image if you're speaking about loneliness and depression among the elderly? This mossy bench with the dedication plaque says so much about time that has passed. Using one of these opening images will connect emotionally with your audience, while at the same time getting them thinking about the problems your presentation is addressing. Before you embark on the typical learning objectives list, ask yourself if the right image will draw your audience in and engage them with your problem. These opening images will connect emotionally with your audience while at the same time raising questions about the direction your presentation will take. If Hitchcock does it, maybe you should too. Hitchcock is a very interesting director because in each of his movies he tackles a new or unusual approach to movie making. Here he has an immobilized hero, so the standard hero stuff, chase scenes and daring do, is just not on the menu. So Hitchcock has to entertain us in a new and unexpected way. Rear Window is like almost all Hitchcock pictures, an exploration of suspense and also of the nature of love and marriage. He does it by revealing the view out of Jeff's windows, 11 apartment windows wide open in the heat. The occupants, from Jeff's lockdown point of view, are his entertainment. The apartments across the way are a movie that he and we will watch for the entirety of Rear Window. What he learns from watching them is the problem Hitchcock is presenting to us. Questions about love, marriage, crime. As a presenter, your job is no different. You must bring your audience through various forward steps and finally bring them to the position you're encouraging or supporting. We'll explore this in part 2 of Rear Window.